Hello, my name is Dan Altschul. Can everybody hear me okay? My wife is Sherry Wallingford, and she was the beautiful and smart Sherry Wallingford. She was the reader today. Harold was coming up and saying it was like the Sonny and Cher show, or the Dan and Cher show. We came down to Houston from Chicago to be with our grandson about 4 years ago. For 30 years prior to that, I was a civil rights attorney for the U.S. Department of Education Office for Civil Rights in Chicago. And I used to do presentations for the agency, mainly about disability or accessibility. And I always started with, I'm from the federal government, and I'm here to help you. Doesn't seem to go over as well in Texas. I have never done a sermon before, and I'm honestly a bit nervous about it. When people do sermons, they often explain that they are a second or third generation Unitarian, or they've been a member of the fellowship for decades. I've been attending the fellowship for about 4 years, and I've been a member for 2 to 3 years. So you're witnessing my first sermon and maybe my last. Today I'm talking about the extended version of the Serenity Prayer as I learned it and I know it. It's an insert in your program. Underneath the insert, it's the bottom half that's titled the Serenity Prayer. And it goes like this. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. I think it's quite beautiful. It goes on, and the next lines in the extended version that I know can be remembered by the phrase, if you want to remember it, pats. So if you're Harold, it's points after touchdown, or if you're someone else, it's like patting your hand, pats, P-A-T-S. And the lines are, grant me patience for the changes that take time, appreciation for all that I have, tolerance for those with different struggles, and the strength to go on one day at a time. Some sermons are directed more externally. This sermon is directed more internally. For example, I found that I often say worse things to myself than anyone else might say to me. This sort of self-talk in the past used to be more negative. The extended version of the Serenity Prayer relates to our principles, the inherent worth and dignity of every person, acceptance of one another and encouragement to spiritual growth, and a free and responsible search for the truth. To me, the Serenity Prayer is very important. It has helped me when I was in a bad place or places. It reminds me that I can only control myself. I don't control other people, places, or things. It reminds me what I can do and what I cannot do. It helps me to adjust my expectations and allows others to address their problems. I use it when I start to meditate. I say it if I can't sleep. I say it when I need to readjust myself and allow someone to address their own problems and issues, and to allow other persons the respect for their decisions and to experience the consequences of their decisions. The first part says, God grant me the serenity the peace, the joy, to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. So what do you get from this? Serenity, courage, wisdom. That's pretty good stuff. I can try and influence political things, homelessness, guns, etc., but I can only control myself. A friend of mine described it by tapping the tip of his nose and saying his control ends at the tip of his nose. And he would occasionally tap his nose to remind himself that his control started there and went backwards. It reminds me to not get involved in other people's problems. If I start to, I can say it and back off. The Serenity Prayer is associated with AA, Alcoholics Anonymous, and other programs like Al-Anon and other addiction issues related to drugs, gambling, sex, etc. It actually predates them significantly. The author is believed to be Reinhold Niebuhr, an American theologian who lived from 1892 to 1971, a fairly long life. And he claimed authorship in a sermon in 1943. He had a colleague, Winifred Crane Weigel, who presented it in a sermon in 1933, and again in a book in 1940 where she attributed it to Niebuhr. The authorship is unclear. I'll give you 3 facts related to that. Niebuhr had some previous writings that are similar to it. There's some belief that Weigel wrote it and attributed it to Niebuhr, as women sometimes in that era would create or discover things, and the credit was given to a man instead. But she also wrote a book and attributed it to Niebuhr. No matter the authorship, the benefits and wisdom are still there. There are various revisions of the first section, and it's also appeared in Hallmark cards and early death notices. So why does it appeal to people who are dealing with addiction? If I were to throw a dead cat in this room, I suggest I could not do so without hitting a person or persons who've been affected by knowing an addicted person, including me. When you're dealing with such a person, and they're your child, they're your spouse, they're your parent, your grandparent, or a friend, there's a pathology, the science of cause and effect. Addiction was described by a friend of mine as self-interest run amok. Self-interest run amok. The person does or wants to do things in the moment that they believe are in their self-interest. They drink, they gamble, the money that they collected for a job and lose it. They cheat on their spouses, they miss a kid's play or graduation, they drink and drive and lose their license or kill someone. The exact behaviors are limitless. Because of the behaviors, they can lose their job, their family, their life. A second person can react by somewhat reasonably trying to stop this. They try and micromanage the first person, make sure that they get home at certain times, make sure that they do certain things. They may nag them, and They try and micromanage the first person, nag them, and get caught up in trying to control someone else's behavior. Typically failing to do so and feeling frustrated. I have to allow another person the respect of their decisions and to experience the consequence of their own actions. I looked on the internet, and there was a version of the extended Serenity prayer that I frankly wasn't familiar with. It was longer and discussed living one day at a time. This one is shorter, clearer, and simpler, and that is good for me. I like that. I can remember it, and I like that. I'm not sure if it's the Midwestern version. I don't know who wrote it, but the values and benefits are there. It's what I'm familiar with and have recited hundreds of times. It talks about patience, appreciation, tolerance, and strength. Again, good things that help me. The next part says, grant me patience with the changes that take time. If you walk into a forest for 20 miles or 20 years, you cannot change immediately. It takes time. You have to work at it. If you've grown up in a household for 20 years, the learned behaviors won't change overnight. Appreciation or gratitude for all that I have. As I get older, I can do less, but I appreciate things more. Time with my wife, my kids, my grandchild, focusing on the good and appreciating life from a cute dog to friendship. Tolerance for those with different struggles. Tolerance for someone else who has different issues. Being willing to accept that they may have different issues or different concerns than you. I can also be tolerant of myself. I went away with my wife recently to an Airbnb in Surfside. I took the only key to the Airbnb and I promptly lost it. In other days, I would have been beating myself up about it. It all worked out through a series of events, and the short version of this is I was able to let it go, and I was able to enjoy a day at the beach with my wife, my dog, my grandson, and my daughter-in-law. And that wouldn't have been available to me at a different point in time, instead of beating myself up for losing the key. Interestingly, the Serenity prayer can act almost like a mirror. One person may focus on courage. I personally love the aspect about appreciation and gratitude. When I'm appreciative and grateful, I just find life to be much more satisfying and happy. So, in conclusion, if any of this helps you, take what you like and use it. If not, leave the rest.